I'm going to break down the first part of the Christmas song and show you some of the techniques that I used. I don't know if in your studies or travels or reading you've ever come across the idea that when you're creating chords from a single note melody line, it's a good idea, and it really works well, to try placing those melody notes as either thirds, fifths, or roots of chords. I've never seen it explained that simply in any book I've ever read. But those are good basic harmony rules. Keep that melody note on top of a chord and place it as a third, root, or fifth, and chances are you're going to come up with a good basic harmony. So here's the first part of that line. I did it in the key of D, and the scale is. So I start off right there on the second string, third fret. That's a D note. And you can follow it right up like that. Well, that's going to give you a lot of the chords for this tune. The different ways you can harmonize these notes. Let's just take the one note right here, the D note. It exists on the second string here, and I know that there are certain chord forms that carry notes as either third, fifths, or roots on the second string. I know what the chord forms are. If you want to place that melody note as a third, then you're going to use an A form chord. Now I have that melody note sitting on top of the chord as a third because I'm using the A form. Now if I play this chord, this happens to be the sixth chord of the key. But what I really care about is it has the one note on top. Sixth chord with the one melody note on top. You can always theoretically place a melody note as a third and find out what chord it's part of as a third by counting back two. If it's a one note, skip the 7 chord, go back to the 6 chord. The 1 is the third of the 6 chord. The 2 melody note is the third of the 7 chord. The 5 melody note is the third of a 3 chord. The reason why thirds is really good to know is because a lot of times melody notes work great on the guitar placed as thirds. So we have that one note placed as a third. I can place that as a fifth. It's right there on the second string, third fret. If I want to place it as a fifth of a chord, I know I'm going to use the E form to do it, because the E form carries its fifths on the second string. Played in this form right here. Carries that D note, the one melody note, as a third of this chord. What chord is this? This is a G chord. This happens to be the 4 in the key of D. So the one melody note is the fifth of the 4 chord. It's good to know, but the important thing is I knew how to place it as a fifth very quickly, because if it's on the second string, I just use an E form. I just know that the E form carries its fifth on the second string. So place it as a third, place it as a fifth, we could place it as a root. And I'm placing it, the D note, as the root of its own chord. And I can use the C form right here to do it, or the D form. In fact, I start off the song on a modified D form chord. Just like that. I just have an F sharp in the bass. So I just showed you 3 different variations of placing that melody note. Placing it as a third, placing it as a fifth, placing it as a root. In fact, I use all 3 of those in this chord melody. The song starts off. And then I come down to here. Well, that's 2 different versions. The first was right there, and then when I came back down to it, and then I'm right back there using it as a fifth. Let me break down some of the techniques and for in-between notes too, tell you a little bit. For this part of the line where it goes, that's just 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. If we're basic harmonization, place them as thirds. The 1 note is a part of a third. The 2 note is part of a third. The 3 note is part of a third. I'll get to this 7 note in a minute, but here's what I actually did. I had the basic minor 7 flat 5 for the 2 note, harmonized as part of a 7 chord, but then I just switched it up underneath. I could switch it up to different chords and they would all work. The trick is coming up with that basic harmonization, then switching from there. For the 3rd note, I really just used it as a third of a 1 chord. It's on the 2nd string, so I just knew play the 8 form. That keeps the melody note as 3rd. Single note melody line, now up to the 7. Here the 7 note kind of works better as if it's an in-between note. In-between notes can usually be harmonized well with either diminished chords, minor 7 flat 5s in a basic harmonization. So I have that 7 note, and I'm just playing it as part of a minor 7 flat 5. I could play it as part of a diminished. That sounded a little better. And then it comes down to a sharp 5 melody note, which again, it's an in-between note. It's not part of the harmonized scale. So, another minor 7 flat. Now this is the 5 melody note. Here the 5 just works well as part of a major 7th version. Yeah, there's a little, you might think of it as a modulation going on, but if you think of it as, look, a couple accidentals, and I'm still placing that 5 as the 3rd of a chord, I'm just using a major 7th variation. Right back at the beginning. So I want to break down that first bit just to show you and demonstrate harmony rules that'll work for you. My book, Arranging with SeeDEGA, really breaks down the chords that keep the melody notes where you want them, keep the melody notes on top, and place them as thirds, fifths, or roots, and shows you just how far you can go in building a basic framework using these techniques.